I think it's about high time that we take a stroll through memory lane. Now, before you get concerned and think that this is just going to be a clip show through all my previous reviews, that's not going to be the case. Today, we're taking a look at Diamine Memory Lane. This is kind of a weird lightish purple, sparkly, shimmery ink that I really don't know how I feel about it. If you do like this color of ink though, I can say at least Diamine was thoughtful enough to go ahead and release the ink vent inks in the larger bottles like they have done the last couple years. So if you do like this ink after you've seen the review, then you can pick up a larger bottle of it at a very good price. Diamine is, well, they're really good about that. It's one of the reasons I like their inks. Still not a fan of these smaller bottles, so Diamine, it's going to be a constant gripe. Please fix the bottles. 2, the print, the silver on purple here, is kind of really hard to make out. So I don't know, maybe next year try not to do stuff like this where it's really hard to see what you're working with. Aside from that though, we are going to be looking at quite a bit of shimmer here, and you can tell that's going to be the case because as I flip the bottle over, that's at least a mil of shimmer in this 12 ml bottle. I hope it comes out in the writing sample. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and get into the KPIs and see how that writing sample looks to see if Memory Lane is going to be a good ink for you. Oh, by the way, if you can't tell, this review is kind of not scripted, so we're going to have some fun with that. First up is going to be the ink blot. You can tell that we're just going to be looking at a lot of versions of lavender, from faded lavender to mid lavender to deep lavender, which I don't really think you're going to be seeing this too often unless you're using a double broad nib or a dip pen. Also, you can tell that the shimmer particles really only came through in this transition area. We're not really seeing them over here in the lighter lavender portions, and not really even seeing them over here in the darker mids. But once you get into these transition tones between a lavender to a velvet purple, you do see quite a bit more of the shimmer coming through, and it's a good look that I honestly wish I could have seen more when I was doing my initial writing samples with this particular ink. It's not a bad thing, I just think it could have been, a little bit more prevalent. Lavender is a good color, don't get me wrong, I really like it. But I think here it really missed out on an opportunity because the shimmer, along with these lighter lavender hues, would have been a really good combination. And we just don't see that here. Looking at the dry times gives us a rather interesting result here with Memory Lane. You can see that we are completely dry at the 30-second mark here on Rhodia, but from 15 to 25 seconds, this ink really has a hard time bringing it home, even though I would still consider this to be page turn dry. As we move on over to Tomoe River, it's kind of the same story. Sure, we are completely dry by the 25-second mark, but once again, in the interim period, it has a really hard time bringing it home, and though I would still call this page turn dry, it's not completely dry until 25 seconds. So for faster writers, or people that write multiple pages in a journal or notebook, you may want to keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and move on over to the water test and see how it holds up over there. Like I said earlier, we are doing this one live, so I haven't scripted this out and I don't know what we're going to be looking at here on the water test. So, as we get water on the page, we are seeing quite a bit of color lift here, and as we mix it around, yeah, you can definitely tell we are getting some ink lifting off the page. It doesn't look like it's too bad, and I think we're going to have a good ghosting layer underneath, but it is something to keep in mind. And yeah, the ghosting layer pretty much did exactly what I thought it was going to do. We had quite a bit of color lift, as you can see from the dry spots here to what ended up getting soaked, but this is still recoverable, and I would put it at about a 2 out of 5. Not necessarily the best, but far from the worst, and in a spill situation, I'd still feel pretty comfortable with this ink. I'm just not really going to put it high up there on my purples, because I have seen better from that color family. This week, we're starting the writing samples off with Rhodia. Now, I can already tell that this ink is trying to make a liar out of me, and it's doing a pretty good job. You heard me mention at the top of the video that this was going to be more of a lighter lavender, and it wasn't really going to hit those transition tones. Well, I was wrong. We are getting a lot of those transition tones coming through, and we're seeing a good amount of shimmer without it being overbearing. Pair that with the water performance and the dry time, this is a pretty good journaling ink. Would I put it in the workplace? Well, no. Any type of heavy shimmer ink, or even a medium shimmer ink, I'm not going to use in a professional setting. But if I'm wanting to spice up my journal life a little bit, and my journal happens to be on this type of paper, like your standard Rhodia papers, then yeah, this is a good combination. Let's see if that holds up over on Tomoe though. This ink is going to be playing a lot more with the darker tones, instead of those lighter lavenders that I thought it was going to be, or at least how they came out when I first wrote with this ink. And once again, that's not a bad thing. Sure, we do get a little bit more dynamic range over here on TR, but that's just the nature of the paper. We're not having any overbearing shimmer issues, we're not having any feed or flow issues, and this ink is actually writing rather well lubricated, which, for a shimmer ink, is a nice touch. Overall, good performance from Diamine. And seeing that I'm getting the same performance on both Rhodia and TR, this ink is a winner for me. The fact that it actually dried a little bit quicker on TR helps push it over the top and actually adds this into one of my journaling inks. So much so that, yes, I will be buying a bigger bottle of this, especially now that Diamine has released the ink vent inks in the bigger bottles for the 2022 series, which in my book is definitely a good thing. And that's going to do it for my look at Diamine Memory Lane. Thank you for sticking with me on this unscripted review. If you liked that video or found it useful, hit like, get subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.